Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us again for One Square at a Time. I am Brandon Croucher. This is Brett Gordon from Businesses Are People Too. Brandon Croucher from Delight Cafe CBD. And we are going to have a conversation tonight about a classic Robin Williams movie. And we're going to discuss it from a leadership perspective, one square at a time. We're going to talk about Hook. Are you excited to talk about Hook, Brett?
I am. I actually, I've always used kind of the Peter Pan analogy throughout a lot of my discussions. And guess what? I really didn't understand a lot of the background of Peter Pan beyond this movie. But, it was really good to be able to do some research on this so that I can qualify a little bit more when I say I want to maintain that Peter Pan mentality.
Yeah.
And really, to get right into it, when I mention Peter Pan mentality, it is this thing here where in Hook, it starts out with Peter Banning, the CEO, corporate attorney, you know, really always on the phone, always on the go, always got things happening, very intense. Um, but he can be intense and happy, which I've been that way. In fact, it reminds me a lot of myself in as I was in the military and then in corporate America, in that, my mindset was around my career, and I made a decision not to have children because at that I just felt it was unfair to have children when my mindset was more like the corporate lawyer kind of person
Mm-hmm.
opposed to the Peter Pan kind of person. Now, my father and my parents, when they decided to have kids, which they did when they were talking about getting married, they also recognized that they were going to have to change their lifestyle in order to accommodate and really care for and bring kids up. And I think that this is something that really comes out in this movie where, if you get so tied into your job or your profession, and or anything for that matter, to where you place that as a much higher priority than your family. I'm not going to place judgment on family over work and all that kind of stuff per se, but if there's a big gap, it becomes a major issue.
I
um,
would agree, but at the same point, I'd have to say I think that just because I know you and I have talked off air, and I know
yeah.
that you and I are talking now about this, he didn't realize he was that because it's not like you see the big gap. And I know personally, my dad is your Robin Williams to your right.
Yep.
My, he really is. And I used to be that way because I thought that's what I was supposed to be. I
Exactly.
really thought that's what his mentality was. That's what it is still. But what separates it is having an idea, knowing that that is an option. It's like there's other movies like Nicolas Cage. I'm trying to think of the one that he does. He has the chance to see what his life would have been like if he the Family Man.
Oh,
If he
okay. Uh-huh.
if he ends up marrying his high school sweetheart instead of going off to law school. So same premise. And I think that we don't realize that when you're building that, you create these ideas like, okay, well, I need the next house and I need the next this and I need the next that. But what's funny is everything is built off of everything. All you need is one bad investment to fall and it could make everything fall, you
Right.
know? And with this, he was in a very negative, didn't even notice it mindset where his kids were trying to get his attention and he couldn't focus. Like he walked out on his son's play or his daughter's play at the beginning of the movie, you
Yeah,
know?
well, he was on the phone while she's on stage, and the son is there going, "Dad, she's on stage." And interestingly enough, in that scene, he's also holding the baseball, which is so important to him because his dad's on the phone. He's like, "Oh, we can do this tomorrow morning," and he's like, "Dad, that's my game. That's my big game." And he's like, "Okay, it's gonna have to be later in the day because I got to go to the ball game." And then he turns to his son and he says something like, "My word is my
Bond.
honor, my promise, whatever." Basically, if I give you my word, I'll be there. And then the next day, he misses his son's ball game.
Mm-hmm. Not by a little bit either.
And this happens. I mean, this happens in a lot of in life, in families. And one thing, if it's one thing to miss the child's game, it's
Yes.
another thing to make this promise that my word is, unbreakable, and then
Mm-hmm.
you break it. Now what have you communicated? It's not just that you missed the game, but you promised
Mm-hmm.
that you would be there and you broke your promise, which is even more impactful
Yep.
than just missing the game. And I think that this is something that we tend to do oftentimes because we're just trying to get through the situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Situation is my son, my coworker, my friend, they're asking for my support. I don't want to turn them down. I might be able to do this. And then I say, yeah, I'll definitely be there. And then it's like, you either call them up at the last minute, you call them up an hour later, or you don't show. No call, no
Yeah.
show.
Yeah.
And that is far worse than just saying, you know what, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to be there. I'm going to try. But if you
Mm-hmm.
continue to say I'm going to try and you don't show up, then people are like, yeah, when you say try, that just means I'm not coming.
Yeah.
That happens
And
too.
that's true. That happened. I'm notorious for that. I will say I will try, and then I don't make it. You need to, when you commit, you need to make sure you commit. That's why you put the phone in the calendar. I've learned that from bad experiences myself. I
Yeah,
think
and I
with
think I think to the degree possible, take the word try out of your vocabulary. You either, like Yoda says, either do or do not. There is no try.
correct.
And like I remember in going to Tony Robbins events, and Tony Robbins brings somebody up on stage and he's talking to them about, making a change. And they're like, well, I'm going to try to do that. And he puts a chair in front of them and he says, try to move it. And then they move it. And he's like, no, 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 no. Just try to move it. What do you mean try to move it? How do you try? You either move it or you don't. There's no try. What is try? So that word try is like a qualifier that kind of gives you an excuse for not doing.
I agree. Yeah,
So
that makes sense.
I'm not saying that I don't use it, because I do at times, but I was about to say, I honestly try not to do it.
I would have called you so fast on
Yeah.
that.
It's you got to consciously think of the words that you choose, because those words have tremendous meaning. And I think that, that comes out in this movie as well. There's a lot of words that are used. So he starts off and he's not following his family, and then his kids get kidnapped by Captain Hook, and he doesn't know that he's Peter Pan.
Yeah, he has no idea.
His granny or gran or aunt, I forget, Wendy, I guess, knows that he's Peter Pan because she's the Wendy from Peter Pan. He just got older and she faster than she did.
Yeah.
And she tries to tell him, you're the only one who can get him back from Captain Hook. You can't call the authorities. You can't do this kind of thing. You got to go. And you are Peter Pan. He's like, no, I'm not Peter Pan. I'm Peter Banning. And he then Tinkerbell, Tink comes along and basically says, screw you, buddy. You're coming with me. And she wraps him up and off they go to actually drop him right in the middle of the pirates.
Yeah.
And that begins the whole competition, because Captain Hook has a hook because Peter Pan cut off his hand previously, and now Captain Hook is really after him. So interesting enough, when you start taking these things into context or out of context, you start to question, there's a villain, but there's kind of another villain. Peter Pan is not exactly the hero. He comes in and he starts off the movie definitely not
Hmm.
And then it's only through the course of time that he realized that he really is Peter Pan, and Captain Hook is prodding him on to become Peter Pan. Right? He's like,
Right off the
fly. If
bat.
you can fly to your kids can go free.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's like,
He's poking the bear right off the bat. He's showing him you're not who you think you are. You're not where you think you are.
and
And
as leaders, we run into that kind of thing, or and again, I say leaders very broadly, that everybody is a leader. Throughout life, we run into situations where we're put in in that type of a situation where somebody is challenging you.
yeah.
And you're either up to the challenge or you're not up to the challenge, or you find a way to change the scenario so that you can be up to the challenge, or go around that obstacle. You don't have to always hit head on. If somebody's coming at you head on, that doesn't mean that you have to come back to them head on. In fact, you can do an end around, or you can change the whole scenario. In fact, if you go back to Star Trek, the newer movies, they talk about how Captain Kirk changed the simulation in order to win. And he's like, well, I don't believe in losing, and I figured out how to change the environment. It's not my fault I figured that out. He worked around it.
Right. If you have the technology,
Yeah.
you know how to use it, use it.
And that technology doesn't have to be technology as we talk about it. It's how do we think about the situation? If we only think that we can go straight forward, guess what? Anything that falls on the road stops us from moving forward, or we have to figure out how to go over it. But if we're like, okay, well, if I know that there's a route over here and there's a route over there, or I can kind of figure out that there might be, then I don't have to go head on against that obstacle. I can go around it. It's a matter of opening your mind to the situation. So when you're talking to your people and there's a new task that nobody's done before, and in the past, everybody's done things similar, but it's always been this way.
Mm-hmm.
But this way isn't going to work this time. So let's think of something outside the box. That's thinking outside the box, right? Get out of the box, step back away, look down on it, and all of a sudden things start to change. And in the movie, Peter Banning eventually is brought to the Lost Boys, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where Tinkerbell brings him so that he can learn how to be Peter Pan and fly again. And this scene here, I think, was so telling, where the boy from the Lost Boys kind of puts his hands around Peter's face and makes him, he's looking at him like, who are you? And then he puts his hands and he's feeling him. And then he kind of stretches his face into a smile. And then you can see the look on his face is like,
yeah, that's a very pivotal part of that
Peter.
movie. That's a very pivotal part for that movie, because it's you can see in Robin Williams' face, Peter Pan, that he's even broken on this. Like, he just left Hook. He got beat up by the Lost Boys because he doesn't look like a lost boy. He looks like a grown man that would be a pirate.
Right.
Yeah. Rufio right there.
Yeah.
Like, and they threaten him. They do what they're supposed to do. But it's funny because behind all of that, Peter Pan / Peter Barker, is that what it is?
Banning.
Thank you. Peter Parker's Spider-Man. I'm glad you that scene is crucial, because if that young boy who the innocence walks up and doesn't take his face and do that, I don't think you could have had a Rufio or another actor from the movie. I don't think they could have done that. I think it needed to be a young child doing that, because it showed innocence inside there. Like
exactly.
the smile at the bottom of your screen. I see it there. Yeah.
Yeah. And those things happen in our lives too.
Hmm.
You know, we get into intense situations. We get into, um, we kind of paint ourselves into corners. And then something comes along or someone comes along and they they change your face. They change the direction that you're looking. They change your perspective. And all of a sudden the world opens up again. I'm
Hmm.
no longer in this corner. I'm no longer so depressed. I'm no longer thinking of suicide. Those things happen. That's why it's important to have a peer group. And it's also important not to get boxed into a room when you're depressed and you just stay there by yourself, because you don't have that outside thing or that innocent thing. Maybe it's even as innocent as your cat comes up and does something, paws at your face or something, you know, so gently, like, what's wrong?
Yeah.
Why are you doing that? And then all of a sudden you snap out of it and it's like, wait a second, you know, this is, I'm not religious, but like, if you take it into the context of religion, God comes into your life in many different ways. Oftentimes people don't recognize that as God. They're like, I'm waiting for God, I'm waiting for God, I'm waiting for God. And while they're waiting for God, they drown because they're on the roof of their house and they let all the lifeboats go past because that wasn't God.
Yeah.
Well, that is God.
Yeah.
You know, those
Yeah.
opportunities come up. Don't overlook those things and look more deeply into it. And oftentimes that's all that you need to go from Peter Banning to Peter Pan.
Very
And
true.
then you can jump and save your kids, or you learn to fly and you can fight Captain Hook and you can get your kids back. So I don't know if you got anything that you wanted to add to that before I
No,
kind of move on to a little
I'm
bit different
following along
piece.
with where you're going. I like so the one thing I would add is I think it's interesting because it's going to help us lead to the next
Yeah.
part too. Is he has Robin Williams has the issue with his son, and he broke his son's trust, and it's interesting because the age of his son to hurt him like that would be around the age Peter was when he was in Neverland, and to see the pain that was in his son's eyes is the best word I can use for that. The anguish. He takes that, and you could easily, if Peter was a kid, see where that would have resonated with him as a kid. And then from there, you can see how they if Peter doesn't make the right decisions by actually going back to be Peter Pan and Robin Williams being Peter Pan, if he doesn't go back and do the fight that he's supposed to be the person he is, he never gets to show his kid what he truly is about. Yeah, you could be a great lawyer and make a lot of money, but to be able to really stand out and be a hero to your kid, that's different, you know. And he had to stand out.
Yeah, there's, you know, as parents, we can oftentimes we substitute in our minds providers for parents. I'm your I'm providing all the things that you need to live with, but I'm not there as your father or your mother.
Yeah.
And you know, let's go follow that direction that you were just going in terms of, okay, so Peter Banning, going back to the story of him missing his son's ball game, his son is he kind of turns away from his father at that point in time. And then remember, they're on the flight over to see Granny,
In
and he's
London, yeah.
throwing that ball up, and his wife tells him, go talk to your son. And he's trying to talk to him, and basically the son's looking at him like, I don't believe you. I don't believe anything you say. You promised me and you didn't show up. You did, you know, and he basically lost the respect of his son.
Yeah.
And in the movie, I think it's really kind of cool because Captain Hook and Smee Mr. Smee figure out, hey, let's turn his kids against him. They had already captured the kids, and they're like, let's turn the kids against him. And his daughter didn't have that same experience that the son did.
Right.
So she didn't believe and go along with the fact that, dad didn't care about us and dad didn't do that. But his son did. He was like, yeah, what you're telling me about my dad not caring about me and all that kind of stuff really is true. And then Captain Hook befriends his son and starts calling him his son.
Yeah.
Taking him under his gentle arm,
Mm-hmm.
all in the name of really defeating Peter, but doing that in a way that, his Peter's son is now bonding with a father figure that he didn't have, and somebody who's living up to his promises.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then Captain Hook creates that baseball game with the pirates in order to give his son that opportunity to play ball and to actually eventually hit that home run. Right?
I do have to admit, it is unique how the universe works. Now, don't get me wrong, it's a movie, it's planned, but we all have these experiences.
Yeah.
He's struggling between his dad and Captain Hook. And in that moment, even though Captain Hook's giving him and giving him and giving him and making him feel like everything he wanted, and his daddy has no idea, sitting in the bleachers watching. You turn around and they say, "Run home, Jack! Run home, Jack!" And they're chanting it. The universe was telling him it in Storyland.
Exactly.
But for us,
well, I'm going to get out of the way so that you can kind of see that scene.
I didn't even know you had it there. That's awesome. Oh,
yep.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
Look at that.
That's what I was just about to say. Wait a minute. I don't remember that in the movie.
Well, now there's a little bit of a play on that. It actually says pussycat, but it's kind of like the deep fake that we oftentimes see on the internet now, where you can take a scene and if you crop out a part of it, the meaning changes dramatically, right? Here you have "Run home, Jack," and pussy, what did it say? Pussy give.
I'll go Pussycats because I don't remember it. But I also don't remember it saying that there because they're so focused on the "Run home, Jack." That
Right.
shows you how your mind takes you somewhere without even real. And I watched this yesterday, so I'd be ready for this, And I have never caught the Pussycat thing, whether that's what it is or not. But that's pretty funny.
So, here's the situation where Captain Hook is intentionally trying to take Peter's kid away from him and leverage him to Captain Hook's advantage. And he sets up the whole thing. As Peter's about to grab Captain Hook's hook, he sees his son up to bat. And he's supposed to be grabbing the hook and taking off, but he's like, wait a second, I'm going to watch this. And then what does he hear? He hears Captain Hook say, "That's my Jack." Yeah. After Jack hit the home run.
Mm-hmm.
And he looks up at Captain Hook and he's like, "No, that's my Jack."
That's my Jack. My Jack.
That's my, I guess not your Jack, but he's seeing this and and then you've got Jack's son in Captain Hook's clothes and then finally I'm gonna get out of the way again here. Down in the corner is when Peter had already saved the sister and now was actually recognized by his son as caring about me.
Mm-hmm.
And regaining his respect. And all of those things happen in life while we're with our family, and they also happen at work with our teams where we have these types of things that go on. We have to be really aware of what's happening and how we're responding, because oftentimes I remember I apologized years after I did this to one of my people that worked with me at my company. I had her come in my office. She wanted to talk to me about something. I said, come on in. I had my computer screen up, and I'm still, doing whatever I was doing on the computer. And she's trying to talk to me about her situation. And I'm like, don't worry, I'm listening to you, but I'm looking at this. That
Yeah.
was a horrendous disservice to her.
Yeah. Yeah.
And years later, I mean, she actually works with me now in terms of as a mentor to her. And she's like CEO level now.
Nice.
But I said to her, I was like, I have to apologize. This has been in my brain as I've learned these things since then, that if I'm inviting somebody into my office, if I'm inviting somebody in to talk about something that's important to them, I need to give them my attention,
Yeah.
not be trying to do multiple things at the same time, not try to get on the phone and answer the phone while I'm talking to my kid, not looking at my telephone doing my internet search while my kids are trying to get my attention. Those are the
Mhm.
things that really start to change the children's perception of you, your workers' perception of you, into being somebody who really doesn't care about what they're trying to convey,
Yeah.
really doesn't care about their best interest. You're concerned about whatever your best interest is.
Yeah.
And
You
as a
you gotta
leader,
focus.
we need to consciously demonstrate that we care about our team, we care about our people, we care about our people beyond just what's at work, as a matter of fact. Um, and we care about our kids beyond just what goes on at home or their grades. We care
Mhm.
about them from our hearts.
Mhm.
Those things fall apart in a lot of families because of the economics of things, where both parents have to work. Parents come home from work, they're dead tired, the kids want their attention. They're like, no, here's your Xbox, go play Xbox.
Here's your
um,
iPad. Here's
Dad, will
your
you play
and
Xbox with me? No.
you know what though? You and I gotta take one side, and it's just because I don't want our listeners to think anything.
Yeah.
I can agree with you on this, on all of this, because I see what my sister does with my niece. I see what some friends have done growing up. Oh, we're never going to give our kids iPads. By the time their kid's 4, their kid knows how to work it better than them. But the thing is, I don't have kids, but I do know that you can't complain about something you don't want to fix. And if you don't want to actually interact with your kid and it's easier to hand an iPad or anything like that, I understand that sometimes you need to do that, but needing to do it compared to just handing it off all the time or get away and I got to focus on this, bills will always get paid. Money will always come. You earned the job you're supposed to be at, but it needs to be you're training the next generation the right way to grow up, not just busy.
Well, and you can do these things. You can have diversions for your children, but what you need to do in order to compensate for that is basically set aside some specific time consistently, that
Mm-hmm.
it is just you and me time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the time that the kids are going to look forward to. And then when you tell them, okay, I'm busy outside of that time frame, they're accepting of that because they know that I'm getting your attention for that, hopefully, more than a half an hour, an hour or something, where you can really focus on them. And the same
Mm-hmm.
thing goes with your teams. It's like sometimes your teams are always coming up, hey, I need this, or can you give me some information on this, or can you do this, or and it's like, hey, I've got things that I got to take care of. Let's set aside a time, we'll talk about it. Then they can move on, you can move on.
Yeah.
During that time, you're not looking at your computer and listening to what they have to say. And like I said, I apologize to um, my coworker there because I didn't give her that time that
And
I should
you
have.
still are
Otherwise,
a
I shouldn't
mentor.
have invited her in the office
Well, if you're going, are you going with because of being busy, or are you going with because of her being a female?
because of being busy. I don't care if it's a female or a male.
You got to know, I come from the church, and from that one of the things they always tell you in leadership is if you have the opposite sex in there, this is just a safety thing. Either leave the door open, have somebody else
Oh,
come in, and all
my
that.
door is
Yeah,
always open. That is for
yeah. That's why when you said it, I'm like, oh crap, I don't know which
when I
way he
say
means
come
it.
into the office, I mean come in so we can talk, but my door is open.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that is something that I
I
learned.
when you said it, I'm like, well, wait a minute. Does he mean like with the door closed? Because that's so different than like,
And that's the same thing. Like if you do close the door because you don't want the conversation to be heard, you better have windows in there so that people can see and don't have your blinds closed and that kind of stuff. Though all those things make a big difference. They also make a big difference in terms of safety factor.
yeah,
And the safety of which the employee feels, and that can be male or female, even if it's
correct.
male to male or female to female. Not having those things open and basically um, a feeling that if I need to escape, I can escape is
Hmm.
very important. Um, because you don't know the mindset of the person that you're actually talking with, and
Perfect
they don't
example.
know
Yeah.
your mindset. So you
Right.
need to have those types of things. So I agree with you 100% there.
It was just that's why I had to clarify it. I didn't
Yeah,
want
yeah.
anything. And thank you for making sure mine made sense. Because as I was talking, I'm like, oh crap, I hope this doesn't sound wrong. I was trying to make it sound right.
No,
But back to Hook.
I've had that situation before where um, I had in a different company, one of my coworkers that she was working for with me. Yeah, I hate saying for me, even though I'm maybe leading the organization, where she came in and she was just, it was a corporate party actually. And then she wanted to talk to me about something serious and she's crying. And I'm like, so I'm so glad my door was open and all that kind of stuff. But it's like, you just don't know where things are going to go sometimes. So having those types of things in place are very important from a business perspective and even from a family perspective. Sometimes, um, luckily I didn't experience this, but there are a lot of people that have where they are abused by a parent
Yeah.
and they close the door and it's like, this is our little secret and whatever goes on behind the door goes on behind the door. But when that door closes, the whole environment changes for that kid. And those types of things happen. So I think that, I believe in people. I believe, in general, people are good and try to do their best, but sometimes we do things that create very difficult environments for the children around us or the team around us because we aren't aware of the environment we set up. Even if that environment was not set up to do something bad, it's still an environment that creates kind of a caged in approach. And
And I
then,
mean, that's what you were going with earlier too.
yeah,
Like with everything going on, if you're don't stay in a room with the curtains shut and everything dark. Make sure you get out. Make sure you're doing things. Same type of thing. When you close a person in a room, I think that could go the same way with the creator of Peter Pan. We were talking about. There's rumors, there's myths, there's truth, there's a lot out there, but you weren't there. I wasn't there. Neither of us are old enough to have been there for the writing, but it's knowing that this book isn't about that, like the little kid stuff. It's more about remembering your inner child. And I think that's what Robin Williams to his son was the whole premise for this, and how easy it is to be distracted by Robin Williams for work because he was bad to good, as we see. And then Hook being he comes across as, oh, he's supposed to be the bad guy, but look what he's doing. It shows you that you don't know. You have to be cautious of what's really going on around you. You have to be careful and watch what your team is doing. The minute Peter, as you were saying at the baseball game, reached for the hook, And he said, Captain Hook says, that's my Jack. And it hurts him. That's when reality set in for him.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is at that same moment, his son and him switch spots. And that's how it works in life sometimes. But
Yeah.
when you have that wake-up call, you have to understand that other person is on a different realm. They're in a different atmosphere, that they're not thinking like you are at that moment. And being able to, especially being a kid, I love my dad, but my dad and I are very different opinions on things. My dad and I have very different thoughts, but hearing one another, and I don't mean this is my dad and I don't hear each other. We talk every day now. We're a lot closer than we've ever been. But like hearing one another and hearing your kids is much different than listening. And listening can be too busy work while you're listening. But hearing what your kids are actually saying is Peter's son at the beginning, all he wanted was his dad to go to the game. And then to the end, he did so much more, like Peter did, for his kids. But he also took years off of the damages he caused by the years built up. So he was able to fix a lot by showing his kids that love.
Yeah,
I would have never left him though.
You can, and it takes a concerted effort, and it takes certain events, usually a series of events that can make that change. And don't expect that because you do one thing or two things or three things that you're going to change a person or your child's perspective of you because of something you did in the past. It is a series of things that you have to do. And it goes back to a previous session or show that we did where I talk about having to bend over backwards in order to then be able to gain that respect and them to come to you and bend over backwards to help you. It's all about demonstrating that it's not a single one-time thing, but it is truly how you feel and truly how you may have changed. And like I said before, forever for now, something happened. I was this way before. My mindset was this way. Now I had something that shocked me out of it. And now I have changed. But your kids or your team is not going to believe that until you demonstrate through massive action or sometimes it can be one massive action. Most of the time it's going to be a series of smaller actions and commitments and things that you actually do that demonstrate that you have changed, that your mindset has changed, that your care for them has changed. And it's so important that we recognize that we have to do that because we're the ones who set the stage to begin with. It's just like I got a keg instead of a 6-pack. I didn't get that keg overnight. It took me a while to build that up. So to expect that I'm going to get the 6-pack overnight is just as ludicrous. It takes time and commitment and desire to do that. And if you lack on any one of those, the outcome is not going to be what you want it to be or what you say it's going to be. Right. So really important as a leader that you consider those things, whether that's a leader of yourself, keg, or a leader of a team or a leader of your family.
So I do have to make one quick side point. Is that, or do you have, I don't want to interrupt you. Don't you think it was interesting that they made Peter Pan afraid to fly when he came back?
Yeah.
He had a fear of heights. Robin Williams was afraid of heights for this movie, in a sense.
Yeah, Peter Pan was afraid of heights.
Yeah, and he had to not just overcome that fear. You could be a tyrant in the courtroom, but you win cases for all these crazy things, but everybody has a fear. And he had to get over that just to be able to get to his kids. And that's essential in the movie, too, because he has that moment where he's reaching out, he just can't reach his kids. And he could have flown and he didn't know it. And it's like us. What is our possibilities? What is your leadership getting you to that you don't even know you have the possibilities to do? Wow, I feel like I'm saying that to myself.
You know,
Wow, do I feel like I needed to hear that from me? Sorry, I said it. That was for you, Brandon. Like right into my head, and I'm sorry I got off track like
no,
that.
that's
Wow.
great. I mean, we all have breakthroughs at different times through different means. So when those things happen, you got to appreciate them for what they are. It's you know, one of the things that we have, this tends to be more of a male challenge than a female challenge, but that is that we feel like we have to be strong, we have to be the provider, we have to be right, we have to be strong in the sense that we're going to stand up for whatever we said, even though if somebody tells us something that demonstrates that what we said is wrong, we're still going to fight to be right, even though we're not. Those are things, those are fears. It's a fear that you feel that if I admit that I am wrong, or I admit there's another way of doing things, or I admit that I shouldn't have done that, that makes you weak, when in fact, it actually makes you strong. And people will look at you and say, okay, he's willing to admit that he made a mistake, as opposed to continuing to drive home something that is only for his ego.
Right.
And we do that as parents too, you know. And this is something that, you know, I've talked about in the past, not really with you yet, but like there was some things that I talk about in terms of how do you break the cycle of poverty. Well, one of the biggest things about poverty is you've got oftentimes both parents are working 1 or 2 jobs each. They come home, the kids have schoolwork, they go to their parents and have a question, and the parents really don't know the answer. They don't. So what do the parents oftentimes do? They poo-poo the value of school.
I didn't need to know that when I was a kid.
You know, you can grow up and do what I'm doing. You don't need that stuff. It's not important. I don't know. You know, they don't say I don't know how to do it. They're just trying to get the children to go away without having to admit that I don't know. You know, I may not be smarter than a 3rd grader from that perspective.
Yeah.
You know, and you see that on TV shows too, right? You know, are you smarter than a 3rd grader or whatever? So having, if you can find a resource where you can have the kids go and get the answer, that's great. But don't put them down or put down the value of something because you don't know it yourself.
Correct.
In fact, you might say, you know what? I really don't know it. I see if you can talk to your teacher or somebody and find out how to do it and come back and teach me.
Yeah.
Now the kids are really going to be excited about that, you know, and you are not looking weak to them. Yes, they may say, well, Dad didn't know this, but if you give them the opportunity to teach you something, you don't think they're going to like that? They're going to like that.
Right.
And the same thing goes for your teams. If you're out there and so forth, is, you know, I don't know the answer. I don't know is a great response. Far better than giving some bullshit answer that you come up with and then stick to. You know, I don't know is a very strong answer. It is, yeah, I won't go down that religious piece, but it's something where, you know, as more of a science background, when people say what's beyond the universe, I say I don't know. Not that I don't necessarily care. It doesn't affect me right now, but I don't know, and I'm willing to accept that as my mindset and my, you know, understand that I don't need an answer for everything in life or everything beyond life. So I don't need, and this is why I believe in people. I don't believe in God per se, because I just say, I don't know. I don't know. And I think that that's a very strong response that parents can have to their kids when they really don't know the answer, but don't put them down. Don't put your team down because you expect them to have an answer. They don't have the answer. Guess what? Don't castrate them for not having the answer. Say, okay, can you go find the answer and come back to me with it?
Mm-hmm.
Or if you're on the team, you should say, I don't know. Let me go do the research and I'll get back to you.
Mm-hmm.
Far better answer than trying to come up with some bullshit to fill in the gap. There's something that I wanted to kind of bring up. It's a little bit, it's definitely in line with this, and it goes to what we've been talking about. And I was lucky enough that my dad liked to come home from work. You know, he was a carpet salesman his whole life, and he worked hard. He loves talking to people. That was a great job for him. It really works with his natural genius. I mean, he's in flow when he can talk to people, but he used to like to come home, change clothes, go out and throw the football with us, go out and pitch wiffle balls with us, play catch with us. He enjoyed doing those kinds of things with the kids, getting down on the floor and playing marbles with us. Yeah, he used to also have this thing, you know, call it, what do you call it? The Chinese water torture, where he'd kind of like have us pinned to the ground and then he'd have spit coming out of his mouth and he'd suck it back up. He's like, you know, this is this torture, but he loved, you know, doing things with us.
Yeah.
He taught me how to bowl, even though I remember crying when he was teaching me how to bowl, because it's like, this is not, I'm not getting the results that I wanted, and I'm trying to follow his direction. I'm like, screw that shit. I should just do it this way. And he's like, no, this is the way you need to do it. And I remember being pissed off, crying, because he was trying to teach me that. But guess what? My grandfather told me the same thing. And both of them were good bowlers. And then I actually learned, okay, you know, it takes time. And then I got to appreciate what they were teaching me, as opposed to it being a torturous thing.
Yeah.
So I was lucky to have that. And then, you know, I went to college and then I went off to the military. And one song that really hits me in the heart, in the gut, when I hear it is Harry Chapin's Cats in the Cradle.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the song is actually kind of the opposite of my experience to the largest extent. You know, in the song, it's like, you know, my child arrived just the other day. He learned to walk while I was away. Happens in a lot of people that are working, especially if you travel a lot and so forth. You know, he says, you know, before I knew it, he grew, and his son is like, you know, I just want to grow up to be like you, Dad. I really want to grow up to be like you. And then, you know, as his son turns 10, this goes back to kind of this game. His dad gives him a baseball, and he says, "Thanks for the ball, Dad. Come out, let's play." And his dad's like, he's like, "Can you teach me how to throw?" And his dad walks, you know, says, "No, I got a lot to do. I can't do that with you today." And his son still is like, "That's great. I'm going to be like you one day," looking up to his dad, but he's not getting this father thing. Then he goes off to college. And this is something that kind of starts to tie into more like me. And that's, I come home from college and Dad says, you know, "I'm so proud of you. Why don't you sit down, talk to me a little bit about what's going on?" And it's like, "Hey, Dad, you know, I'd like to, but what I really want to do is borrow the car keys. Can you give me the car keys, please?" And then I'm out the door and I don't have the time with my dad. And then at the end of the song, it's like, "I've long since retired. My son's moved away. I called him up just the other day. I said, 'I'd like to see you if you don't mind.'" This is the dad. He said, "Dad, I'd love to if I can find the time. But the job's a hassle. The kids have the flu. But it was really nice talking to you, Dad." And then the dad hangs up and he says, "You know what? I realized my boy grew up just like me."
Mm.
And I get emotional even now just talking about that,
Mm-hmm.
because that's, my dad gave me the time. Then I went to college. Then I went to the military. Then I was away. And for almost 20 years, I was away. I'd go home and stuff like that. But if I did go home, it was, normally go out and catch up with the friends and all that kind of stuff. It wasn't too much, father, son, mother, son kind of thing. So I moved my parents. I live in Vegas. I moved my parents from Chicago out to Vegas so that I could be closer to them. I was actually working in LA, but kind of commuting. And then my company went to move my position from LA to New Jersey shortly after I moved my parents out to be closer to me. And my brother was here at the time, too, or is still here. But I had just gone to a Tony Robbins event, and I realized that when I made the choice to go to New Jersey, I made it for the professional reason. And I needed to change my decision. And I went back to the company and said, I'm not going to New Jersey. I just moved my parents out here. I did it for a reason. I did it to be able to regain a bond with them that I have not had for 20 years. And, that song hits me like that every time. When I was watching this movie, it was kind of bringing me to that same conclusion and situation. And when I talk to people and I find out, that they didn't have the kind of childhood that I had. They didn't have the father that wanted to go out and play. They didn't have maybe even a father, period, or a mother or a family that was theirs for them. And I have to relate to that. I remember going in and being a substitute school teacher for just a few weeks when I got out of the Air Force. And I went to the junior high school, which in my town was the toughest junior high school. The kids that had, the more challenging environment growing up. And I was their PE teacher like got sick or had surgery or something. So I was there for like 3 weeks, and I'm trying to relate to the kids now. I didn't have gangs in my day really that affected us. When I went back there, the gangs was a part of their everyday life. Not having a father was there every day of their life. And then they looked at me for answers and to bond with, because they wanted to have a father figure. Mm-hmm. They wanted to have somebody that they could trust and not worry about being hurt physically or emotionally. This is something that happens every day. And as leaders in our lives, with our friends, at work with our teams, and even as business leaders, I say now you need to also start to really look more closely at your employees' lives beyond the workplace. Mm-hmm. Or consider what's happening at the workplace and recognize what it could be doing in their home environment, and look at things more holistically, because it is so critical that we don't grow up so much that we don't have time to spend with our kids, that we don't have time, even if you don't have kids, that you don't have time to be a kid again and take that opportunity. And that's why I love watching these movies. I love going to Disneyland and Disney World. Now, I'll say that in the same vein, I'll say, the greatest thing that would make it even better is if there weren't so many kids there, so that I could have just the fun with everything that's going on. But
I think there's a lot of people that would agree with you, even the ones that have kids, just so we know.
Yeah. So, and I enjoy that. And I think that those are the types of things that doing our series and tying them to these movies and things is important, because we're actually talking about movies that our kids may be watching, mm-hmm. our employees may be watching, especially if, like myself being a boomer and having the millennials watching more of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and things along those lines, to be able to tie those together through things that are more fun but draw out the meanings and how they can create can create that bond, that gap that we talk about between boomers and millennials and so forth. That gap is a perceived, I mean, it's a real gap, but it's because of perception. And perception
Yeah.
is reality, but there's really a tremendous amount of commonality. There's a different perception of how the world should be. And you know what? If everything should be this and should be that, guess what? You could should all over your life and it ain't going to be any good. I mean, and I meant it with exactly what you did.
It was perfect. You nailed it.
That is exactly what we have to be aware of when we're, especially when, and very much so when we say this is how things should be. No, that's how things should be based on our perception of what things are, not necessarily what someone else's are. So be aware, get into their world, get into Peter Pan's world, get into your child's world, get into your team's world. As a leader, when you do that, you will be so much, your team will want to, your children will want to do things that are the goal, the mission, the things, but you got to talk them through. You got to get everybody to kind of understand where you're coming from and why, and you've got to go to their level too in order to make them feel comfortable that you actually, as we talked about in Avatar, I see you. I see you is not with my eyes, it's with my soul. And when you see your team, when you see your kids in that way, when you see yourself in that way, the opportunities to lead yourself, your team, your children are immeasurable.
Yeah.
And this is what really comes out of this at the end, you know, the respect that Peter Banning got after he saved his kids, and the respect that they had, and the respect that he had from Wendy, and it didn't even talk about kind of the Tinkerbell Peter Pan relationship. But one of the things that happened there is Tinkerbell loved Peter Pan and she gave him a kiss. And then Peter like backed away and he's like, no, but I love my wife. I love my family. I can't do this. And that was a very important part of the bonding in his family, because he had lost all of that, including the real relationship with his wife, because he was so tied into work. Remember, she threw the phone out the window, like, you know, fuck that.
Yeah.
And this is what has to happen sometimes, you know, metaphorically, hopefully, but sometimes it happens in reality. Or physically.
You've never thrown a phone through a windshield?
No, I have not. I do at times, you know, and my girlfriend gets mad at me because there's times if I do something stupid, I'm like, and I hit myself in the head, and I do it in a way that is not the gentlest, but it is one where I'm like trying to literally bang into my head. Don't do that again. You know, don't make the same mistake twice or thrice or 15 times, because a lot of times it is 15 times before maybe I figure it out.
And that's the one that was the 15th. I understand.
Yeah. Or other times is finally just say, hey, I make mistakes. Guess what? Yeah. It's life. And I don't need to beat myself up for it. I just need to try to pick up some value from it. And if I do it again, and it's not like a real serious thing, but it's okay, you know, what do you learn this time? What do you learn this time? Or what did it cost you this time? Or what did it cost you that time? And 9 times out of 10 or 99 times out of 100, whatever that mistake was not tragic, or was not, you know, life or death. In fact, you probably 999 times out of 1,000. But it's one where, okay, I can learn something for the future. I can learn how to maybe teach others not to have that same mistake, or to recognize that, you know what, I've got a little bit of dyslexia. That's going to happen.
I'm used to it by now. 38 years.
I mean, I cannot. I'm great with numbers like math and stuff, but if you ask me to remember a telephone number and you give it to me in 2 seconds, I can't remember it.
Nope.
And I can literally be looking at a piece of paper with the number on it, and I'm trying to type it in, and I type in something backwards.
Yeah.
Or so in
I
those
do that
cases,
all the
it's
time.
like, okay, let's just concentrate a bit more, focus on it. I'm still going to make mistakes, but if I do make a mistake, admit it. And
Yeah.
I've had that happen where I actually went into a boss with some calculations that I may have done and inadvertently made a mistake. And he's like, these numbers don't add up. And instead of trying to feel like he's being aggressive against me or whatever, it's like, oh shit, let me go back and take a look at it.
Yeah.
And sure enough, I make a mistake, go back and say, hey, sorry about that. It happens.
It does. Yeah.
And I had great bosses. I mean, I had great leaders in the military. I had great bosses for the most part, to where I learned a lot from them. But it's now that I'm actually able to give back to the world a lot of the things that I've learned, a lot of the things in life that I've learned, as we talked about here, and even the fact that I haven't had children or things like that. Kids feel comfortable around me.
Hmm.
Don't know why. It's got to be the energy that I have, that I give off, and that they perceive. It's the same thing with animals.
Mm-hmm.
Animals more than likely will not bite you if you are in an energy of not being aggressive yourself or
Yeah.
being afraid. Because when you're afraid, they're afraid. They don't know why you're afraid. So those are the types of things that we can learn. We learned from this movie, when Peter was afraid and he didn't reach out and couldn't reach out to save his kids, and then had to learn to fly. All those things are just, they're part of reality of our life today.
I was reaching for you. So, what would you say the tool is then for us to put in our tool belt?
This may sound a little bit hokey, but I'm going to say the pan is mightier than the sword.
Go ahead. I'm going to listen to this one, but I'm
So
picturing a frying pan, just so you know.
I am perfect.
All right.
The
Perfect.
pan is mightier than the sword. The frying, the and let's just take it. Okay. So the pan is mightier than the sword. You can cook whatever you want in the pan. If you want to take it to the pen analogy, you can rewrite things.
Yeah.
You can remake things in the pan. You can add things to what you're making. It's all about being open to it. When you
Mm-hmm.
close yourself off, when you say that it's only this recipe that works and I cannot deviate from it, there's going to be 99 times that you have to deviate and only one time that it actually works. Or if it does work 50% of the time, that's great. Then 50% of the time it doesn't. Or even if it works 90% of the time, there's still 10% that you need to add something to it, take something away from it. Maybe you need a bigger pan, maybe you need a smaller pan. So it's all about really not being tied into the size of the pan or the recipe that you're using, but to open up and look at what's outside, because oftentimes it's what's outside that you're missing when you're in the pan. And I think you brought up this analogy before. It's kind of like you can, if you put a frog in a pot of lukewarm water and then heat it up, the frog's not going to jump out. But if you put a frog into a boiling water, it's going to try to jump out. So the same thing goes for life. If we're inside of it all the time, we may not recognize what's really outside of there. When we're that corporate leader in all of our thinking, and then something comes up that is not within that box, we need to open up our mind to be a child again, because children have imaginations.
Yeah.
As we grow older, oftentimes we lose that imagination. So the pan is mightier than the sword.
I like how you turn that on me there. I like that. Like, the pan is mightier than the sword. I just pictured Peter Pan going dink, dink, dink.
Well, yeah. I mean, take it however it is, but if you don't dink, dink, dink in a way that's different, the chances are you're going to get
Dinged.
Dinged.
Yeah,
Exactly.
100%.
Yeah.
Wow, this was a good one, buddy. This was a real good one. Um, I had fun. Did you enjoy Peter Pan?
I did, and
Okay.
it was, like I said, it was a very much a learning experience. A lot of the things that we didn't talk about were very much a learning experience, and one that now, when I say that I want to have a Peter Pan mentality of not growing up, I need to be qualifying that a little bit, because there's other people that know more about Peter Pan history and things like that, which
True.
may interpret what I said differently because it's coming from their perspective as opposed
That's good.
to my
Oh, I'm coming
perspective.
down in 1 second. We're saying goodbye. You want to say hi?
Hello.
Hey, dinner.
Thank you.
Well,
I got poked in the eye.
don't
But
you
it
love
was in a
his
very
beard?
loving way.
Do you love his beard?
I love his beard.
Did you see? I lost a bet and had to trim it.
Oh, yeah. That was a trim, huh? You didn't have to cut it completely off.
I lost about a good 2.5 inches.
I wasn't allowed to use scissors,
If
or
I
else
lost
trust
2.5
me.
inches, I wouldn't have anything.
I know where I need to edit film now. No, I was never going clean, and that was the deal. I got to at least keep it down to like a lower level, but like she got the trimmers and she started trimming, and I gave her the biggest ones I could so that way I wouldn't have to lose as much. At least 2.5 inches came off because I was down to here. Like if
Yeah.
I put my head down, I could feel it on my chest.
I've never used those things. I think I did a pretty darn good job.
Yeah. On
Hey,
air, I was getting like my hair pulled. People enjoyed that. They're like, no, they enjoyed watching you pick on me and beat me.
I was going to say,
Like,
how'd you get your hair pulled? Oh,
The way
that
you
hair.
do.
Not
you
that
little
hair.
Sugar Ray Leonard.
Oh, he's been an
Yeah,
asshole.
No, wait till I tell you what he did to the microwave. I'm surprised he didn't lose his tail today.
I see your jaw again. That's where your face has been this whole time.
I must
Hi.
look cute now. But and we're back. I will edit it from there. But I think that a good way of looking at this is you're 100% right. The pan is mightier than the sword. However you want to look at it, but make sure you have your, like, whether you're, it's a ding ding, but having that inner child come out, which is really funny because I connect it like with my inner child, but being able to separate the pains and let go and forgive yourself so you can see, because that's where I was looking at this is
Exactly.
Robin
I mean,
Williams to his son.
yes,
It's so easy to
exactly.
let the world distract you and be taken away by things that look like they're all there, like Captain Hook. You know, he made everything look fantastic, but then at the end his true father came out, and I think that's why they related, is because that father son is that child inside all of us.
And the pan, Peter Pan, was mightier than the sword or the pen that his Peter Banning father had
I agree.
in terms
I
of
agree.
leading his son. And I'm sure, if he took that into work, it would be the same type of thing. So that's the critical aspect of this and the learnings that I have. I mean, when I do each one of these, I learn something too. And that's kind of what I learned.
I like it. I love it. So Monday we're doing
Inside Out.
Inside Out with Sarah. Next Friday we're doing Wreck-It Ralph with Joe. If he'll be better by then. When I
Wreck-It
told
Ralph
him
with fuck Joe.
with fucking Joe, Wreck-It Ralph with fucking Joe.
Exactly.
I love it. I love it. So Brett, you want to take us out, or am I taking us out? Because I brought us in.
Okay. I'll take us out. I'm Brett Gordon with Businesses Are People Too, working with people to try to help them to grow as leaders and as people. And this is Brandon Croucher of Delight Cafe CBD.
Mhm.
And he's looking at using his product to help people navigate life in a much more calm, balanced, and delightful way.
It's starting to catch on. I like that that's starting to catch on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you, Brandon. I appreciate it. I really look forward to the next one. And guess what? I got an idea for kind of a season 3 thing or something that we're going to take on beyond this. And that is that we're going to start to call upon the audience and have the audience participate in a review of movies so that we can get a perspective that's completely different.
That's funny. That's what I was going to talk to you about too. I think if we add with the StreamYard stuff, we can make a doodle of a movie to get the conversation going. And then if we open it up for once a week to talk about people.
Or we can have somebody in the audience within parameters select a movie and then we can work it from there. So I'm cool with that.
I like that idea. Yep.
All right.
I love it. I love it. All right, buddy. It was a wonderful time getting to see you again. I thank you. And this was One Square at a Time. Brett Gordon, Businesses Are People Too. Brandon Croucher, Delight Cafe CBD. Until next time.
Have a great one.
Guys.
Take care.
You too, Brett. Thanks, buddy.
Bye now.